Right. So once again, welcome everyone to the session. Let's get on with this. And in today's session, what we are going to talk about is looking at CAT in another 6 months from here on, six and a half months from here on. How should we be preparing for the session? What should we be exactly doing in terms of our preparation related to each of the three sections which are there on the paper? What are the general instructions that we need to follow, and all of that. So let's get started with this. Now, if at all you have any doubts or any clarifications at any point in time, feel free to put a message on the chat box and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Okay, so let's move on and let's look at the profile for Kushal at this moment. I am your speaker for the day, and I've done my MBA from Narsimhanji, Mumbai for the batch of 2014-16. I've worked with AjayZener for a couple of years, handling a supply chain, automations and supply chain for them. I've written CAT almost about 11 times at this moment and have scored 99% on several occasions on the CAT paper. I'm a co-founder of GradSquare and about 10 plus years of experience of training students for a variety of entrance exams like CAT, GMAT, GRE, and the other set of exams. Okay. So let's get on and let's look at the agenda for the day. What we are going to look at is a historical perspective to CAT, where we will try to understand what has transpired on the paper for a last about 4 to 5 years of time frame, and that will give us an understanding of what to expect from the paper going forward, which is for CAT 24 and for CAT 25. What kind of inferences can we draw from there? Understanding the syllabus, so going through each of these sections, trying to understand what are they asking you on each of these sections, and preparing a strategy around for all the three sections. When should you start writing the mocks? How many mocks should you write? At what frequency should you write? All of that is something that we are going to cover in this session. The general points to remember, the other entrance exams that you can write, and at the end of it, I will briefly touch upon the topic where a lot of students come back and ask me that should we be looking at professional coaching, or should we look at just preparing by ourselves in the try to attempt the paper? So what is the difference when you take help, take a professional coaching, or what you should be very careful about when you are trying to prepare on your own for this particular paper? Okay, so let's get on and let's look at the historical perspective for the CAT paper. If you look at the exam pattern on some occasions on certain parameters have remained the same, and on some parameters it has changed over a period of time. If you look at 2017 to 19 papers, you would realize that these papers were a total of 3 hours paper. 1 hour per section is what the time limit was, and you had 3 sections on the paper, which was VRC, LRDI, and quantitative ability section. Verbal ability had 34 questions on it, LRDI had 32, and quantitative ability had 4 questions on it. All in all, you had a total score of 300 marks, and approximately at about a 95 to 155 marks, is in between 145 to 155 is where we see a 99 percentile happen in CAT 2017 to CAT 2019. CAT 2020 was the first paper for in the season of COVID, and that is where to change the paper a little bit to accommodate one more slot on the paper. So CAT 2017 to 19 used to happen on 2 slots in a day, that means morning and evening slot. But when it came to CAT 20, they had to accommodate one more slot in order to ensure that there's not too much of a crowd enter and the COVID restrictions and all of that. So they ended up bringing the paper down to a 2 hours paper, which is in effect giving you 40 minutes on each of the 3 sections. So your VRC in CAT 2020 had 26 questions, your LRDI had 24 questions, and your quantitative ability section had 26 questions. So all in all, you were looking at about a 76 questions in CAT 2020 paper. The total marks was 228, of course, and because it's a maximum of +3 on a particular question, so that makes it 220. The approximate 99 percentile, as I said, that CAT 2020 and onwards have been conducted across 3 slots in a day. The range of score is what we are looking at on each of the 3 in each of the 3 slots. You would realize that it was somewhere about a 98 to 102 is what we were looking at in CAT 2020. If you look at 21 to 23, which is CAT 21, 22, and 23, the pattern has not changed in terms of the number of questions being asked on each of these sections. So it has remained the same: VRC at 24, LRDI at 20, and quantitative ability at 22 questions. And line for each of the three sections, time limit for each of the three sections also remains the same, which is your 40 minutes for VRC, 40 minutes for LRDI, and 40 minutes for quantitative ability section. All in all, a maximum score of 198 is what you are looking at. And if you look at an approximate 99 percentile, it has moved between 82 marks as a raw score to about a 92 marks that you should be getting. So this is telling you a picture which says that if you want to score a 99 percentile in end of a paper, a 50% of the paper going right is something that to a fair degree assure you that you will be getting a 99 percentile overall on the paper. So if you look at 2017 to 19 paper, about when a maximum mark was 300, you are looking at about a 145 to 155. Again, a percentage is what you are looking at. 228 on CAT 2020, the paper turned out to be slightly difficult than expected. The 99 percentile fell down to about 100, which comes down to about a 45 to 50% of the paper. Now again 82 to 92, again it is coming down to the same levels, which is about a 45, anything between 45 to 50% of the paper being right effectively is getting you a 50, is getting 10 percentile score on the paper. Okay, so let's move on and let's get a sense of at what kind of scores, what kind of percentiles do I get. Now I'm comparing only CAT 2022 and CAT 2023 on this particular screen, where in CAT 2022, which was relatively an easier paper in comparison to CAT 23. Mind you, I'm saying CAT 2022 was an easier paper in the absolute sense. It was a difficult paper to attempt. When I compare it with CAT 23, I realized that CAT 2022 was an easier paper. The 99 percentile out of 198 was at 90 marks. At about 70 marks, we had a 95 percentile. 90 percentile was at about a 55 marks, 85 45%, 45 marks out of 198 and a 40 marks out of 198 would have gotten you an 80 percentile. This screen term will be important for those individuals who are from the category, which is the reserved category, where you can understand at what kind of percentiles do I, at what kind of scores do I get what kind of percentile, and according to the colleges that you are looking at, what kind of cutoffs are you looking there, can give you how much of the paper you need to get right in order to get into your desired B schools. If you look at CAT 23, a 99% this paper turned out to be even more difficult in comparison to CAT 2022. It down to about 83 marks out of 198 to get a 99% on this paper. Now, when I say 83, I'm giving you a ballpark figure because across the three slots, this score would change. So anything between 82 to 86, 87 is what we are looking at a 99 percentile as a raw score. Okay. Now 95 percentile was at 56 as a score that came way too low for CAT 23. 90 percentile was at 43 marks. percentile was at 39 and 80 percentile was at about a 35 marks on the paper. Now imagine I am talking about three sections on the paper, and if at all you want to get a, let's say, 95 percentile, what effectively are you looking at in each of these sections? It is not even a 20 marks from each of these sections is what you are looking at. So the paper does not turn out to be difficult if you understand what is expected out of on the paper. So expectation should not be that I'll get 90% of the paper right. Nobody gets that, or very, very few of them will ever get that 90% or 100% of the paper correct. Almost impossible is to call that out, right? So that's the understanding that at a 99 percentile, if I want to get a 99 percentile, about a 50% of paper correct. Even if the paper turns out to be on an easier side, I don't think the 99 percentile would ever go beyond a 55% of the paper being right, looking at the last 5 years of the papers, right? Let's move on and let's look at some of the general information for you to understand before we deep dive into each of the sections and strategize for each of these sections. You have got two types of questions. You have MCQ type of questions, which are multiple choice questions. Of course, only one choice is correct out of the 4 choices given to you over here. Theta questions are type in the answer questions where they give you a small space to enter your answers like a calculator, and you have to type in your answer in the form of numerical values. For example, if you're getting your answer as 23, you will have to just type 2 and 3 and submit that as your answer. The important point to understand over here is the theta questions, which are the type in the answer questions, do not give you a negative score if you end up getting that incorrect. So an incorrect question, which is a theta question, is not taking any effect on your paper in terms of giving you a negative score, but your MCQ questions, if you go wrong with, you are penalized and your score comes down by 1 mark for every question that you've gotten wrong from MCQ questions. Typically, the paper happens on the last Sunday of November. This year, we expect it to happen on 24th of November. I'm not very certain, but it might happen. If they feel that 24th of November is a little too early, they might end up taking it on 1st of December, which also happens to be a Sunday. But we are not certain. Nobody is certain. And we will have to wait for the notifications to come out. We can call out the date. But there is a fairly good probability that you will have to take that paper on 24th of November. Paper will be conducted across 3 slots in a day. Again, we will have to wait and watch what they come out with. We expect the paper to remain on the same lines as far as last 3 years of paper is concerned. So we believe that the paper ideally should be a 2 hours paper with 40 minutes each, and the 3 sections remains the same, which is your verbal ability and reading comprehension, logical reasoning and interpretation, and quantitative ability section. So we don't expect any changes there, but we will have to wait for the notification to come out. One thing that I can say with surety is that the 3 sections are not going to change. That means your section will be verbal ability and reading comprehension, second will be logical reasoning and data interpretation, and third will be a quantitative ability section, because almost last 10 years of the paper, if you look at it, nothing has changed in terms of the sections that they are asking you the questions from. Okay. Now let's move on and let's look at the slot wise questions, and answer key will be released in 7 days time. So if you look at the last 3 years of paper, we have realized that plus and minus 2 days, your slot wise question paper and the answer key comes out. That means the answers that they believe are correct are given to you. They also tell you what are the questions that they've asked you. They also tell you what are the answers that you have marked. That effectively means that within 7 days of the CAT paper, you would know your raw score with you. You will have your raw score with you with almost 100% certainty, right? And once that is there with you, you can guesstimate your percentile to a fairly good accuracy. That's what my understanding is. So we need to know that we don't have to wait till the month of January for a fairly good understanding of how you have performed on the paper. Interviews typically starts for all the colleges in the month of January. Not all the colleges, but some of the colleges, it starts from January and it moves on in the month of February and March. Okay, so that's the set of things that I want you to understand about the CAT paper before we get to each of these sections specifically. Okay, so guys, I'm again repeating, if at all anyone of any doubts or any clarifications you want me to answer anything, please feel free to put it up on the chat box and I'll be happy to take any of the questions. Okay, so let's move on and let's understand what are the 3 sections that we are talking about. We are looking at verbal ability and reading comprehension as your first section. Now, I know what I'm saying over here, this happens to be your first section. It means you cannot decide which section you will take first on the paper. Verbal ability and reading comprehension will be the first section for every student. LRDI followed by LRDI, which will be the second section, and quantitative ability, which will be the third section. Verbal ability and reading comprehension, as we have already discussed in the last 3 years of paper, they've asked you about 24 questions. Out of these 24 questions, what has remained the same for all of the 3 years of paper is there were 16 questions of reading comprehension and there were 8 questions of verbal ability. We will deep dive a little bit more on verbal ability when we will get into the analysis of the section and try to understand how to prepare, what to prepare, when to prepare, and all of that. Logical reasoning and data interpretation questions are present in the second section of the paper, and logical deduction based questions are there, and your graphs and plots kind of questions are there. So just to give you a basic idea, there can be an arrangement kind of question where they might give you 10 individuals sitting around a circular table and they say that A sits opposite to B, B right of H, and likewise about 8 to 10 conditions are given to you. Based on these 8 to 10 conditions, you will have to come out with one or multiple possible arrangements of these 10 individuals and answer the questions based on these arrangements that you have gotten down to. So this is typically an understanding of reasoning kind of a question. What can be a graph or a plot or a data interpretation kind of a question? There will be a data represented to you in a form of a bar graph or in a form of a pie chart or in some kind of a graph that you have never seen till now, but they will of course define the rules how to read that particular graph, and based on that you will require to calculate certain values and give that as your answer to the questions. Okay, now the third section is quantitative ability section, which is typically your math up to 10 standard. The topics that they ask you are from the modules of arithmetics, algebra, geometry, number system, and modern math. Now, what each of these topics contain and how many questions from each of these topics contains, we will look at when we look at each of the three sections and try to understand what is there on each of these three. Okay, so let's start with our first section, verbal ability and reading comprehension questions. This is an understanding of CAT 23, the recent paper that has been conducted. There were 16 questions of reading comprehension, questions per reading comprehension, and 4 were there. Now these reading comprehensions were typically of about 500 to 550 words as a length of the reading comprehension. Now it is advisable that today you sit on your laptop and just read a 500 word passage, copy paste from somewhere, do the word count and understand for yourself as to how much time it takes for you to read about a 500 to 550 words. So that gives you an idea as to what will be the length of the reading comprehension when you get into the paper. Negative marking, of course, is there on all reading comprehension questions, because all reading comprehension questions are MCQ type of questions. You don't have to type in any of the answers. So that is why negative marking is there, and the weighted paper happens to be about 66.6%. That means of your verbal ability and reading comprehension section, 66-67% of the score is devoted to or is taken up by reading comprehension questions. There are 2 questions of para summary. Now, what is a para summary? They'll give you a paragraph about, let's say, 100 odd words or 70 to 100 words, followed by 4 options, and they'll ask you which one of these 4 options is the apt summary for the passage which is given to you, which was a 100 words passage, right? So again, you will have this as your MCQ type of questions, and the weightage happens to be 8.33. Now, understand this thing, guys, that all of this that I'm talking about on this present screen is about CAT 23. Now, there were a few changes in this particular distribution with respect to CAT 2022, right? So in CAT 2022, you didn't have odd parajumbles, but you had para summary, fill in the blank, and parajumbles making up for the 8 questions. Okay, there were 3 about, if I'm not wrong, there were 3 para summary questions, there were 3 fill in the blank questions, and there were 2 parajumble type of questions. Okay, so that was for CAT 2022. Now, what happens on 24? Nobody knows, but we expect it to remain on the same lines, and we believe 2, 2, 2, and 2, which is equal among or 4 type of questions is what I would prefer to see on the paper. Okay. Now, odd parajumble, again, you had no negative marking because you had to key in your answer to tell them which of the 5 statements that they give you is an odd statement when you consider it with all the 5 statements. That means they'll give you 5 statements. They'll say 4 of these statements arranged in some order forms a paragraph which makes complete sense. But there will be one statement out of these 5 which does not go well with those 4 statements. Which one is that statement is what you are supposed to tell them when it comes to an odd parajumble type of questions. Fill in the blank type of questions, please understand this thing, that these fill in the blank type of questions are not vocabulary oriented questions. These are logic oriented questions. And why do I say this? They do not give you or they do not ask you what word to fill in this particular blank. Rather, they give you one statement and they say that you have to tell them this particular statement will fit into which blank. Will give you a paragraph which will have 4 blanks numbered as blank number 1, blank number 2, blank number 3, and blank number 4, and they'll ask you that this statement will get into which of the 4 blanks in order to form a paragraph that is a coherent paragraph. Okay, so that's your kind of question. And all 3 questions or all 2 questions on CAT 2020 three paper were of this nature only. So they are not looking at a vocabulary oriented fill in the blank. That is something that we are certain. This is logic oriented. You need to understand the context in which you are going to put this particular statement in which blank. Okay. Parajumble, they'll give you 4 statements. They'll ask you in what order should you arrange these 4 statements in order to form a paragraph that makes sense. Okay. Again, what makes this particular kind of questions, I'm referring to parajumble type of question. What makes parajumble type of questions difficult is exactly this, that there are no options present over here. That means you can't read in any suggested order. You will have to figure out the perfect order. Now, that makes it what? Very, very difficult for you, because there are 24 arrangements possible of these 4 statements which are given to you, and only one of these arrangements is correct. That means your probability to get this question right goes down. Now, when we go further into the verbal ability and reading comprehension section and strategize for this particular section, you will understand the importance of me telling you that your probability of getting a parajumble question is very low, right? So that you understand where to prepare and what to prepare, right? I hope this is clear in terms of an understanding of what VRC paper contains. Now let's understand what you should be very, very careful about when you are preparing for verbal ability and reading comprehension question. The skill that they are trying to test every student on is the reading skill. If your reading skills are not there, then they don't want you to be in their B schools. It is as simple as that. The entire paper. So if I look at these 16 reading comprehension questions, if I look at 2 para summary questions and 2 fill in the blank questions to my mind, are all reading oriented questions. So out of 24 questions, you have about 20 questions which are purely testing you on your ability of reading. Parajumbles and odd parajumbles, I honestly cannot categorize it into any place, right? And I don't know why those questions are there, but I can't really help it. So my understanding is that these 20 questions is where your play is, and all 20 questions are honestly dependent upon only one skill, which is reading skills. So what you should be preparing on, you should be preparing on ensuring that your reading skills improve over a period of next 6 months. As I said, RCs are your bread and butter. Verbal ability and augmentation. Now, this is where I want to spend a little time and talk about this, that why do we call verbal ability as an augmentation? Okay. Now, let's look at this. You have got 8 questions of verbal ability, wherein I consider parajumble questions very, very difficult to get right. Out of the 2 parajumble questions that they give you, I will not be surprised if you're not able to get any of the 2 parajumble questions right. Okay. Now, you have got odd parajumble questions, again slightly more tricky but easier in comparison to parajumble, because again you have 5 options and 1 out of these 5 options is correct. So naturally your probability of getting odd parajumble correct happens to be higher in comparison to parajumble type of questions. The third type of questions are fill in the blank questions, and you have your para summary type of questions. Now, on a very good day, and underline the word that I'm talking about, on a very good day, out of these 8 questions, I expect you to get 4 to 5 right. And that 4 to 5 right also happens only if you have attempted all 8 questions. So let us presume that it is a very good day and I get 5 correct and I get 3 incorrect, right? In that case also, I land up between a score of 12 to 15 marks. If I land up with a score of 12 to 15 marks, understand the entire section gives you about 40 minutes of time. Now, out of this 40 minutes of time, if I have to attempt all of these 8 questions, I would require, if you are not so great in English language, you would require about 7 to 8 minutes at least. Now, imagine this leaves you with about 30 to 32 minutes to do your 16 reading comprehension questions, right? Now, this was a best case scenario when you get 4 to 5 questions right out of 8. Now, suppose if it is not your good day, then what do you get right? You probably get about 3 questions right out of 8. And this is where the challenge is, that making your preparation dependent upon verbal ability gets you nowhere on the paper, right? Mark my words, you will find a lot of YouTube trainers, a lot of, intellectuals talking on Quora and saying that, you should focus on verbal ability, you should get questions right on verbal ability. But my personal experience, which is of about more than 10 years, says very clearly that for a student to get verbal ability questions right, it is extremely difficult. But what is easier to do is to get reading comprehension questions correct. So I have met students, I myself have written this exam several times, and my English language skills are not good. That is when I can say that I am still able to get about 11 to 13 questions right out of the 16 questions that I'm attempting. Now that tells you the entire story, that reading comprehension is a place where you should put a lot of focus rather than putting a focus on verbal ability at the beginning of your preparation. I'm not saying that you leave verbal ability. We will come to that piece as to when to prepare for verbal ability, but your first thing to prepare for should be your reading comprehension. I hope I've laid enough emphasis on this fact that reading comprehension is where your energy should be. Now, how to prepare for reading comprehension? You have to practice reading comprehensions. Now, one thing that I'm absolutely against is reading generic newspapers, reading, novels, reading books to improve your reading comprehension. Remember, I'm not against reading newspaper. I'm not against reading novels. I'm not against reading any for that matter. But if you're wanting to prepare for reading comprehension, my strongest, and if I'm allowed only to do one recommendation, I would tell you that go ahead, look at reading comprehension passages specifically and solve reading comprehension passages. That is the only thing that will help you in your reading comprehension skills as far as clearing the paper is concerned. Okay. Now, one more aspect of reading comprehension is something that we need to understand, that these reading comprehensions are picked up from variety of sources. Now, as let's say, I presume that we are writing this paper and we are not exposed to foreign authors in our general reading. Then the problem is there are different ways, a different origin individual is going to write a particular thing, because that is influenced by several factors. Now the problem is that these reading comprehensions are picked up from variety of sources present on internet across the domain, across the nationalities of the authors. Now, in order for us to get used to these nationalities, those quality of reading comprehension, that kind of a content, it is imperative on us to go and look at international journals to start preparing from. For example, you can look at the Smithsonian, you can look at Scientific American, you can look at Eon Essays, you can look at a variety of newspapers which are available, which are very standard newspapers that people refer to. You can look at Wall Street journals. All of those are the places where you can prepare from. Now, one piece of advice to all of you, that whenever you are reading articles from Smithsonian or Scientific American, don't read it for the heck of reading it. Once you are with reading, close that reading comprehension in front of you and just sit and try to recollect as to what the author was trying to say. I'm not saying that recollect every small detail that you have read, or every number that you have read, or a person's name or an individual's name that you have read about. Don't do that, but try to follow the thought process with which the author has written the paper. And that's something which is very, very important. Don't just read it sitting there and say, I have done my task of reading it. Your task is not over unless you sit and think about it. What you read, what was the author trying to communicate, what was the author not trying to communicate. Okay? So decipher that and you will be fine in terms of your preparation. So pay a lot of attention to reading comprehension. If you can get your hands on proper reading comprehensions where they're framed questions 4, 5, I think that's a very, very good source to look at. Okay. But nonetheless, to get used to of reading variety of thoughts, variety of topics, you should look at international journals for sure. The verbal ability practice should not take more than 3 months of your time, and you should look at starting this preparation in the month of September, October, November. 3 months of preparation on verbal ability of all 4 kind of questions that we've come across till date in verbal ability section is more than enough. You should take about 3 months of time every day, prepare, let's say, about 10 para-summary questions. Let's say prepare a 10 para-jumble kind of questions, fill in the blank kind of questions, and I think that should be it. In fact, I would go to an extent of saying that 10 of each is not even required. You pick up 2 varieties of questions and do 10 questions of each for the last 3 months of your preparation, and you should be fine by the time you reach the CAT paper. It is important, and when I'll come to the mock papers, I'll discuss this a little bit more, that you need to understand that in your mocks, you need to start getting the scores from reading comprehension. But I'll park that discussion for some time before when we look at, reading, when we look at mocks, that is when we will discuss all of that. Okay. So I've just got on a statement. Sir, what are the sources for GS students for reading comprehension? Krishna, we will, when Varun takes your reading comprehension session, he will talk about that in the classroom. So don't worry about it. Text Varun and he'll tell you where to do that. We have our login portal, we have our book material, and we have other sources as well. He'll keep you informed. Don't worry about it. Okay. So let's move on. And let's look at the second section, which is your logical reasoning and data interpretation section. Logical reasoning and data interpretation section had 20 questions. You had 4 sets and you had 5 questions per set. Now, this again, once again, I'm referring to CAT 23 paper. In CAT 2022 paper, there were 2 sets. There were a total of 4 sets, out of which there were 2 sets which had 6 questions each, and there were 2 sets which had 4 questions each. Honestly speaking, this, to my mind, which is 5 questions per set, looks more logical approach towards this paper rather than looking at 6 I don't expect this pattern ever to come back, but we just don't know until unless you look at the first slot paper, right? So you can't really comment, but I believe this is more standard and this is what we should expect and prepare for on the on this year's paper. Okay, you had about 12 questions where negative marking was there, so that means about 8 questions were there where the negative marking was not there. That means those were theta questions that you are looking at. Now, typically speaking, on CAT 23 there was to a greater extent absence of data interpretation question, and most of the questions were logical reasoning based questions. Now, I am nowhere in this argument trying to tell you that you should not prepare for data interpretation question. You must 100% prepare for data interpretation question, because if those questions are present, those are mostly on an easier side in comparison to logical reasoning questions. Okay. Now let's understand what one should be very, very careful about when they are preparing for logical reasoning and data interpretation question. The first thing that I don't want any one of you to do is to pull out a CAT paper to try and understand and to prepare to start with for the CAT paper. Okay, why am I saying this? The questions of CAT paper are slightly more tricky, and when you have never been exposed to those kind of questions, it is injustice towards yourself to expect you to crack those questions in the first attempt itself. Had that been that easy, anyone could have done that, and we would have never spoken about LRDI as a section. That very clearly indicates that the paper is slightly more tricky, and you should first do one thing, which is to familiarize yourself with the nature of the questions. When I say familiarize yourself with nature of the questions, I mean to say that before you look at CAT questions, before you start preparing, first go and figure out what are number-based logical reasoning questions and how they look like. Attempt a few number-based, logical reasoning questions. Attempt a few, games and tournament-based questions. Attempt a few linear arrangement questions. Attempt a few circular arrangement questions. Once you have done that preparation, a fair bit of preparation you have done in terms of getting yourself familiarized with the content, that is when you should be looking at the difficult order questions and stepping up on your preparation. I think when should you be start looking at the CAT level questions? I think after about 1.5 to 2 months of a serious preparation of logical reasoning and data interpretation section, you should look at those kind of questions, right? So when I say 1.5 2 months does not exactly mean that on 45th day you are going to look at. After the 30 days itself, you will be in a position to start looking at those questions, start solving those questions. Of course, you might face a few challenges in all of these questions. That's bound to happen. That's a part and parcel of the game. So you should not be fearful about that. But starting your preparation with the CAT questions is something that I will vote against. Okay. Know your targets and understand your exam paper well. Now that means what? That's the most important point to my mind on this entire slide. That know your paper really, really well. You had 20 questions, and guess what? About 8 to 9 questions correct on CAT 23 paper would have gotten you close to a 99 percentile, or in some of the in some of these slots, you would have crossed 99 percentile by doing just 8 to 9 questions correct out of 20 questions that you are looking at. That means what? That means you don't even have to do 2 sets correct. 2 complete set correct means what? 10 questions correct. That would be a 30 marks. And that's beyond what is required to get a 99 percentile. So understand this thing, that you don't have to score 99 in all 3 sections in order to get a 99 percentile. So even if you are looking at a 96, 97 percentile on an LRDI section, you are expected to get about 7 to 8 questions correct, which is about a score of about 21 to 24 marks. That means what? You have to do just 1.5 LRDI sets correct, right? So when you write your mock papers and you get 1 set correct, I would be very, very happy to look at that student that in the first 3 mocks or in the first 4 mocks, you have ended up getting 1 LRDI question, 1 LRDI set completely right, which is 5 questions right. I would be super happy because I know that my targets are not way too far from here on, right? I just have to, improve on my speed of doing the first LRDI set, and I get into the second LRDI set, I would be able to get 3 to 4 questions right from there as well, right? So knowing your targets really well, knowing the exam really well is of a great importance when it comes to LRDI as a section. DI is dependent upon arithmetics as a module. That means there is a lot of percentage calculation that they want you to do. There's a lot of average calculations that they want you to do. They want you to look at a lot of ratios. They want you to look at weighted average. All of these concepts are a part of data interpretation as a module. That means what? You should not look at data interpretation module unless in QA section you have finished your arithmetics as a module. So if you have finished arithmetics as your module where percentages, averages, ratios, weighted average, all of that is covered, then you should look at data interpretation, not before that. Otherwise, you are going to struggle a bit because you are not aware about the concepts itself. Okay. Be realistic in your expectations. That means what? When you first day write your first mock, you should not expect yourself to get 3 LRDI sets right. You should do what? You should look at getting 1 LRDI set right consistently for the first 3 to 5 months. Once you are able to do that, your scores are automatically going to improve because you will be able to solve your first LRDI within 20-25 minutes of the paper. That will leave you with another 15 to 20 minutes to do the second LRDI set, and that is how you are going to progress, right? On the very first mock that you write or on the second mock that you write, if you expect yourself to get 3 right and you don't get that, you will be very disheartened. And that is where I want your expectations to be very, very realistic from this particular section. Okay. The best way to improve on this is to write mock papers. You might sit at leisure, solve logical reasoning, data interpretation sets. That's absolutely fair. And you must do that to begin with. But at some point in time in your preparation, you will have to put yourself against mocks and understand how many questions am I getting right? Am I, being very frustrated when for the first 15 minutes I don't get an LRDI set? It might happen that you choose your first LRDI set, you don't know what to do on that LRDI set and you are struggling. So that kind of an experience is very, very important before you step into the actual paper, and hence mocks becomes very, very important part of your preparation when it comes to logical reasoning and data interpretation paper. Okay, let's move on and let's look at the next section, which is your quantitative ability section, primarily math. And what I've done over here is I've put up the distribution of the paper. Now understand this thing, that these 2 papers, which is CAT 2019 and CAT 2020, had very different number of questions. So CAT 2019 was a 1-hour paper and you had 34 questions. This, although was a 40 minutes paper, but the number of questions was on a little higher side, right? What you should ideally be looking at is this. Now, why did I put this up then in that case, CAT 2019 and CAT 2020? To convey one very specific point, that look at your arithmetics. It has always been a largest share taker of your quantitative ability section. That means you must pay a lot of attention on arithmetics. And as I told you, on data interpretation, arithmetics again is of a greater significance because you cannot do your data interpretation questions right if you don't get your arithmetics right. So it becomes all the more important from a perspective of 2 sections rather than just 1 section. Okay. Now, there is a trend that we have looked at in the last 2 years of paper, which is CAT 2022 and CAT 2023, that the share has gone down a little. If you look at CAT 21, it was a 50% of your paper, which was from arithmetics. It went as high as 11 questions from arithmetics. But in CAT 2022 and 2023, we've seen it moderating and coming down to about 7 to 8 questions. If you ask my personal opinion, I don't expect it to go lower than this, because I don't think that's justified for them to look at 4 questions or 5 questions from arithmetics, because then the other modules will become way too important, right? So this, to my mind, is a very good mix of putting 7 to 8 arithmetics based question. On the next slide, we will understand what do I mean by arithmetics, what do I mean by algebra, what kind of questions. So all of that will be there on the next slide. Don't worry about that. Now, algebra. Again, if you look at it, barring this particular paper of CAT 21, your algebra has almost been very, very close to arithmetics and has been the second most important module. In fact, on the last 2 years paper, it was absolutely equal to arithmetics, is what we've seen, right? That means what? If I look at this 22 question paper, I'm looking at about 15 to 16 questions coming from arithmetics and algebra put together. So if your arithmetics and algebra is done and you have prepared really well on these 2 modules, then you are in a position to capture about 75 to 80% of your paper, right? And which is way too much. Why? Because on CAT 23, about 8 questions correct out of 22, which is a raw score of about 24 marks, 24 to 27 marks anywhere on any of these slots of the day, was getting you a 99 percentile. So you can imagine, in your paper of quantitative ability section, you just have to attempt about 8 to 9 questions and get everything right, which is absolutely possible, right? That means what? That means that if I've done these 2 modules itself, which is arithmetics and algebra, properly, I would get very close to where I want to be on the quantitative ability section. If you look at the other 3 modules, the third most important module to my mind, which is geometry. Now, mark my words, CAT is full of surprises, and I will not be surprised on CAT 24 if the number of questions coming from geometry goes up. That means what? That means instead of preparing for 2 modules, which is arithmetics and algebra, I want you to prepare extensively for 3 modules, which is arithmetics, algebra, and geometry, preparing you for a worst day possible on the CAT paper, where geometry goes higher or becomes equivalent to algebra, right? Why am I saying this? Because in my experience, I've seen a lot of times students coming back, and most of these students coming back and telling me, sir, can I leave geometry and get into the paper? It's a risk that you are playing. I don't know whether that risk will pay off or not, because anybody who will look at this and say only 3 questions, and if I leave that and prepare well on arithmetics and algebra, makes sense. But that only makes sense if you get lesser number of questions from geometry. One more point to tell you, that last year's paper, the one that I wrote, the slot that I was in, your 3 questions out of geometry, 2 were very easy questions. And because I'm not good at geometry, I ended up leaving those questions. That means the rest of the paper turned out to be difficult for me, right? So if your spread of topics is very good in your preparation, then it becomes easy for you to ace this paper, is all what I'm saying. So these 3 modules is something that you should focus on. Number system and modern math. Number system is typically questions coming from, your remainder based questions, your unit digit based questions, your last 2 digit based questions. All of those kind of questions are number system, and modern math is permutations, combination, and probability is what we are looking at. We have just looked at about 3 questions coming from that consistently in the last 3 years of paper, right? So that means what? You can safely put these 2 modules as at the end of your preparation. That means do not start your preparation from permutations and combination and say that this is the topic that I fear the most and hence I'll start my preparation for that. Doesn't make sense to me, right? So what makes more sense to me is look at arithmetics, algebra, geometry first, followed by number system and modern math. One important point that you need to understand is that although on the CAT paper, number system and modern math are on a lower side, but it is very, very important with respect to the non-CAT exam that we are going to eventually discuss. So a paper like NMAT had about 7 questions coming from permutations, combination, and probability as recently as NMAT 2023, right? 7 questions out of, if I'm not wrong, it had about 32 questions if my memory serves me right. So understand this thing, that this was a very huge proportion of the questions coming from modern math. And if you leave that in your preparation, you suffer on a paper like NMAT, That's what my understanding of that paper is, right? So please ensure that you are being very careful and aware about what you are doing on the paper. Let's move on. And this is the slide that I wanted to pay attention to. This is the slide that is talking about what am I considering as arithmetics, what am I considering as algebra, geometry, number system, and modern math. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this. Now understand that there are certain topics on this slide itself which are, surprise packages. For example, if I leave CAT 23 and I look at previous 2 years of paper, we had 0 questions coming from trigonometric ratios. But CAT 23 had direct question coming from trigonometric ratios. Now, same is the case with, heights and distances. We have not seen heights and distances for a long time. Same is the case with, something like an iterative function. We have not seen questions coming from iterative functions for a long period of time. But as I said, CAT is full of surprises. So there's nothing wrong in preparing for these kind of topics as well, right? So that is why I've put all of those topics. Be prepared. CAT 24, you are going to write. You are going to look at 2 questions on the paper and say these are surprise elements. That has happened every year. So this year also it is given that out of 22 questions, there will be 2 questions which you have not expected to be a part of the paper are the part of the paper. So you will have to live with that. But the beauty of that particular set of questions is that those surprise questions are, generally speaking, on an easier side. That means if your spread of the preparation is well, you are not fearful of any topic on the paper, then you can get those questions right which others might find it difficult, as those were surprise elements for them on the paper. Okay, I'm repeating it once again. If you have any doubts, any clarifications, feel free to put it up on the chat box. As and when I look at those questions, I'll pick up those questions and I'll answer those. Okay, let's look at preparation strategy of QA. And I've picked up a few challenges that students face and wanted to address these challenges in this discussion itself. Okay, so the first challenge that I come across from a lot of students is, sir, it is a very short-term memory that I'm gaining, that when I prepare for a particular topic in your classroom and I look at that topic and I feel that I'm very comfortable, 20 days down the line, I feel that I've lost touch with that topic. If you feel that way, then you are absolutely normal in terms of a student preparing for this paper, right? Because any student that I've come across has always complained about this thing, that I'm not able to remember the topic. So what are you supposed to do? Simple: revise periodically, especially the topics like arithmetics, algebra, and geometry. Keep revising them over and over again. Honestly speaking, if I talk to any of the 99 percentilers on the previous years, and I've been training students for a very, very long time, if I talk to them, how many times have you gone back to arithmetics as a module? I'm sure that they are going to say that at least 7 to 8 times I've gone back to to a specific module in order to prepare for this. So if you believe that you will be able to remember everything right now that you prepare in the next 15 days, you will be able to remember over a period of 6 months, that's not going to happen. And that's absolutely normal. There is nothing wrong with you. So keep revising it. By the time you have revised it 4th or the 5th time, you will realize that you have gained a lot of confidence in your preparation on that particular module. So please be very careful about this, that there's nothing wrong with you losing memory of a particular topic, but go back to it and you will find after 3 or 4 attempts on it, you will be fine on that. Struggling with a specific topic. Students come back and tell me that geometry is something that I don't know how to look at, or algebra is something that I don't know how to look at. I've always maintained this thing, that you find a topic difficult because you have not prepared enough on that topic. You have a roadblock in your mind which says that this topic has been difficult for me in 10th standard and hence it will be still difficult for me. As long as you do not try that out, it is always going to remain difficult for you, right? So what is the only thing that you can do to not struggle with the topic is to pick up that topic and sit with it for a longer period of time. Now, the more you delay your preparation, suppose you don't like algebra, and more you delay, you say that, I'm going to look at algebra in the month of November, the bigger the problem will be, right? So you really need to understand that you need to tackle your problems right now, right here. So if you have figured out that you are not good at algebra, then sit with it. There is no other solution that I can give you for this particular problem. That it's the absence of preparation that is making it difficult for you. Otherwise, I've maintained that quant is the easiest section to prepare for in this entire paper. There is no doubt about it. English is a lot more difficult section. Your LRDI is a lot more difficult section because they don't know what they're going to ask you, right? Probably a reading comprehension that is going to come on the CAT 24 paper has not yet been written. So how can you prepare for something that has not yet been written in this world till now, right? So you will have to pick up better skills. But quantitative ability section, I have not seen a very surprising question, honestly speaking, throughout my life on the CAT paper, because I would have seen a similar question somewhere in my preparation, right? So easy to prepare, but it requires time and effort. Okay, so please ensure you give it that. Avoidable errors. I have always come across students after the CAT paper, after the answer key is released, they come back and tell me that, oh my God, sir, what blunders I have made on the paper. These are avoidable errors. Now, how do you do this? How do you avoid this? How do you not make this on your paper? By ensuring that in your preparation, you are not taking these errors slightly. For example, today when I'm sitting and solving 10 questions, and at the end of 10 questions, I check the answer key and I realize I've got 3 incorrect, right? Go to those 3 questions and figure out why you went wrong. And suppose there was an addition mistake. Don't congratulate yourself that, oh, this was a simple mistake because of which I got it wrong, but I know the topic. You know the topic, but this has become your habit of, there is a lapse in your concentration. Don't make it as your habit, is what I'm saying. So whenever you get something wrong, it should hurt you, it should pinch you, it should remind you that, I snapped in my concentration, and that should not happen over and over again, right? So it's a very dangerous habit to develop. I have seen several students who are extraordinary, but come back and report the same thing. That's a paper was very easy, but I messed it up. I don't want any one of you listening to me at this moment to mess up your paper because of that. Okay. Okay. Next question that I come across is, sir, my speed is very, very low. Now, please understand, as far as CAT as a paper is concerned, I don't really subscribe to the fact that your speed should be extraordinary as far as maths is concerned. How many questions are we looking at? We are only looking at 8 to 9 questions correct out of 22 questions in a 40 minutes time frame. Understand, 40 minutes time frame. You have to figure out your 8 questions and solve them. Each of the 8 questions to figure out and solve is giving you 5 minutes of time. Right? First thing. Second thing, who is asking you to become a 99 percentiler on the QA section? You become, that's great for you. If you say that my math is not great, you don't have to become a 99 percentile. You have to just get a 7 questions right. No, just get a 7 questions right, get a 97, 98 on the QA section and feel happy about it, because then cover up on the other 2 sections, right? It is not necessary that you have to get 99 on each 3 sections to get an overall 99. Nobody's telling you that. So know your targets and understand that this is not a game of speed, right? Yes, I do concede to the fact that a paper like NMAT or SNAP are primarily based on speed, that you have to be faster. But CAT as a paper is not a speed game as far as mathematics as a section or QA as a section is concerned. The last thing, a lot of students come back and say, sir, I'm not able to attempt more on the paper. I'm attempting 5, I'm getting 5 right, but I'm not able to scale that attempt to 8 or a 9 or a 10 on the paper. Now understand, there can be one prime reason why you are not able to attempt more on the paper is you are wasting time. What do I mean by wasting time? You need to understand that when I'm saying you have to do only 8-9 questions out of 22, you have to leave about 10 to 12 questions. What am I saying? You have to leave 10 to 12 questions unattempted on the paper. If you start spending time on these 10 to 12 questions, that is where your number of attempts are going to go lower. So do not hesitate in pressing the skip button on the paper. That's the key to success. That skip button is a key to success. I still remember CAT 23. When I went into the paper, I looked at the first 7 questions. All were algebra based questions. And I felt those questions were slightly more difficult. Had I not pressed the skip button every time, I would have, not done well on that paper. So the point that I'm trying to tell you is that do not hesitate in pressing the skip button on the paper. Know that you need to get only 7-8 questions right. Figure out the easier questions first and do those questions. You will realize that your attempts are going to go higher, right? So that's one way by which you can ensure that your attempts do not stay lower. Do not spend time on wrong questions. Get down to the questions which are from your strength zones and do those questions. That's all. right? If you do that, I'm sure your number of attempts are going to rise. Don't expect yourself to attempt 16, 17 and 18 questions, right? Expect yourself to attempt 9 or 10 odd questions on the paper and come happy out of the paper, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Let's move on and let's look at mock taking. And as far as mock taking is concerned, I want to tell all of you that we have already conducted a brilliant session by Varun, who has taken this session, and we have uploaded this session on our YouTube channel. I am putting a message for everyone to see, which is the link of that particular YouTube video, right? So please understand this thing, that if you go through that, you will get greater details of how to write mock, when to write mock, what to do with mocks and all of that. As of now, I will not have that kind of a time to cover everything. So I'm going to briefly discuss this, but if you want detailed explanation of that, please look at that video, and trust me, every single thing that he speaks of in that video is just amazing if you can just implement that. After skipping, can we come back to the same question? Yes, Sasha, you can come back to the same question at any point in time when you skip a question within a section. So if you have moved from LRDI to quantitative ability as a section, you can't go back to LRDI as a section. But within the quantitative ability section, you can move on and come back to that particular section after skipping, right? So that's the question that I had. Now let's talk about mocks. When do you start writing the mocks? If you are preparing for the first time for the CAT paper, do not immediately jump and write your first mock now without preparing anything, because that's going to hurt your mind and emotions a lot, right? So avoid writing your mock paper in the first 2 months of the preparation. If you are somebody who has already prepared for the CAT paper last year, if you are preparing again at this moment, it's okay to understand what is the thing that you remember from your last attempt and all of that, and to try and attempt one paper. But anybody preparing new for this paper must not attempt a mock paper in the first 2 months of preparation. Now, presuming you are starting your preparation now, I would want you to see that you write your first mock in the month of July, and that too by July end you should be looking at, okay? June and July. So if I'm looking at mid of May right now, the half of May, June, and larger half of July should go in your preparation. And by the end of the July month, I want you to write your first mock. Okay. In your August month, I want you to write 3 mocks, which is space it out in 10 days time. In 10 days, every 10 days, just write 1 mock till the month of August. September, October, November is when I want you to really peak and write more number of mocks. It is not casted in stone, the numbers that I've written over here. You can of course play around with this number here and there, but don't drastically change it by making 10 mocks in the month of August. That's not going to give you any benefits. Because please understand, when you write a mock, what are you supposed to do? You are going to write a mock, you are going to analyze that particular mock, you are going to, in this analysis, find out your mistakes, you are going to practice again from your book material, and then you are going to go and write the mock again. This entire cycle, if does not happens for any mock, then that mock is wasted. So this entire cycle has to happen for 10 times at least, 10-15 times before you say that yes, I've understood the paper and how to write and what to do and what not to do, right? So that's something that you need to understand, that don't write mocks just for the heck of it. You have to analyze the mock, you have to go back to your drawing board again, prepare for a particular topic, come back, write a mock again. So what is the number of mocks that I'm looking at? I'm looking at anything in excess of 15 mocks is more than sufficient to my mind. Let me categorically criticize what is promoted on internet, that you should write 100 mocks, you should write 50 mocks. All of that does not make sense. Why? Because to my mind, it is a 2 hours of effort to write a mock, and it takes bare minimum of 4 to 6 hours to analyze a mock. So if I'm looking at this entire mock taking for one particular mock, I'm looking at about 8 to 10 hours of effort, right? 4 to 6 hours you will take when you have attempted the paper really well. If you have not been able to attempt the paper really well, it is going to take an upwards of 6 to 8 hours to analyze the mock. So it is 8 to 10 hours of effort that you are looking at one mock, and somebody is asking you to write 100 mocks, which is a 1000 hours of effort. That's a little too much time to my mind to put on, to have on your plate in the first place to prepare like that. So 15 to 20 mocks is more than enough to my mind. Anything between 20 to 25 mocks is amazing. Anything above 30, I think it is unnecessary to that, to my understanding and my beliefs. People might criticize me on saying that, but I stand by what I'm saying, that anything above 15 is a very good preparation. Anything between 20 to 25, excellent. Sweet spot is there between 20 to 25, but anything beyond 30, 35 marks, you are overdoing the process. Okay. How and what to analyze the mock? Please understand, writing the mock is not going to give you any benefit if you do not analyze that mock. It's, as I keep saying this, that the easiest job to do is open your login and start writing a mock. That's the easiest job. The tougher job is after you have written the mock, which is to analyze that mock to the core of it, that you know everything out of those 66 questions that was asked to you on the mock paper. If you can do that, that is when you have actually written the mock. Writing the mock is the easy part of writing the mocks. Analyzing the mock is a more difficult part and the most challenging part and the most painful part also, and the most rewarding part as well. Right? Why painful? You are going to realize, oh my God, I should have done better on this. So that's going to hurt you. Why is it rewarding? It tells you that what mistakes are you making, where are you lacking, what you should be preparing on, how can you improve. All of that is going to help you in a longer run. So please understand this thing, that this is something which is something that you must do. Analyzing means, Anthony, as I said, that you take up your paper, go through every section in detail. That means if I'm looking at quantitative ability section, look at all 22 questions, try to solve them on your own. Understand any question that you tried to tried during the paper. Why did you not get the answer of that question? Right? Anything that you left, why did you left on the paper? Was that question correct to leave, or was it your mistake of not understanding that question properly and hence you left an easier question? Clear with this? Same thing has to be done on English language as well. When you are looking at reading comprehension section, you need to really understand that why did you leave a particular reading comprehension, right? Why did you get an option wrong? When you marked option C as an answer, why did you mark option C as an answer? What was your logic behind it? And if it is incorrect, then why is it incorrect? What did you miss? That's called as an analysis. Every part of that 66 questions, you should understand what was there. Clear? Let's look at the next part, which is the points that I want you to remember, which is generic points, not with respect to any section, but in general. Balance your preparation across 3 sections. Very, very important. Why am I saying this? I have typically seen students great at quantitative ability section, but they continue to do just that only in their entire preparation. That means they get a 99.9 percentile on the QA section and the VRC is at 30 percentile. Will you get any calls from the colleges? No, you will not get any calls from the colleges because you will have sectional cutoffs. That means what? A bare minimum on each of the 3 sections is something that you have to score to get good calls, right? Point number 1. Point number 2, the longer you avoid a difficult section, the bigger the problem becomes. That means my LRDI is not good, and I say I'm going to prepare LRDI in the month of September. Makes no sense to me. This is the time to prepare LRDI because you figured out that it is not good. I keep telling my students that your day should start with the most challenging section for you. So if you find VRC as the challenging section, your day should start with VRC. Typically, the section that you are attempting last in the day should be the section where you are super comfortable with, right? So that is the way to prepare, not the other way around. And students typically do it other way around. Okay, don't make that mistake. It's not a marathon, it's a sprint. Sorry, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. What do I mean by this? I do not like a student when a student comes and tells me, sir, I will do 12 hours, 15 hours of study. You tell me what to do. Because my problem with this student is that today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, he or she will be able to spend 10, 15 hours because they are super excited, motivated today. But to sustain this preparation for the next 7 months is going to be very, very challenging. So instead of telling me that, sir, I'm going to spend 15 hours today, tell me that, sir, I don't have time but I will promise that I'll give you 1 hour every day for the next 15 days. Will that work? I'll say that will work amazingly, right? So commit whatever time you can, but ensure that you are very consistent in your preparation rather than being on one fine day spending a great amount of time. That's going to do no good to you. Take it in writing from me. So that is what people do. That, sir, I've done 20 reading comprehensions today. Will it do any good? No, it will not. It will make you feel good at the end of the day. But will you be able to do 20 reading comprehensions every day for the next 20 days? Probably not. Right? So be very, very careful with that. Don't do that. It's a long-term game that you are running in. Ensure you are very consistent, and in 2 to 3 months of time, you will find a marked difference in where you are today and where will you be 2 to 3 months down the line. This is a very, very critical part. Do not wait for your syllabus to get over to write the mocks. A lot of students tell me this thing. When I ask them to write the mock, they come back and tell me, sir, how will I write mock today? Because I have not prepared completely. Your preparation is never going to end. Take it in writing from me today itself, that it is never ending, right? So once you have done an appreciable preparation, that means, let's say you have finished arithmetics as a module. Let's say you have prepared 45 days for reading comprehension every day. Let's say you have prepared 2 LRDI sets every day for about 30 days to 45 days. You are absolutely ready to write the mocks, right? Doesn't matter. You don't have to score 100% of the score in the mocks anyways, right? So go ahead and write mocks, because it is very important that you get used to writing mocks. Constantly evaluate your preparation. This is very important. When I say constantly, I don't mean to say every day you should at the end of the day sit and evaluate your preparation. You should evaluate your preparation in a span of about 30 days, 20 days, 25 days, that how much have I improved? How much more is to be done? Do I have the timelines for this to be done? And if at all I'm running short of time, at what levels do I have to be in the next 15 days with a fast enough process for yourself, right? So that is why I'm saying that, you should evaluate yourself constantly. But constantly does not mean every second, every minute of your preparation, every day. Don't do that. There are a lot of people who do this, that, I'm not able to get this question right. Oh my God, I'm not good. What are you doing? You are unnecessarily evaluating yourself, judging yourself in every minute, every question. Don't do that, right? Do that after 15 days, 20 days, 25 days once. That's more than enough. Starting early is only an advantage when you are being very, very consistent. Okay. So understand this thing, that, there are a lot of people who say that, I'm going to start my preparation 1 year in advance. Let them do that. But will they be consistent over the next 1 year is the question. So 6 months, is it enough to prepare for the CAT paper? Absolute emphatic answer, yes, to this question. That yes, you can prepare really well and you can get any percentile in 6 months time, provided you are being very consistent in your preparation. Clear? So keep that on your mind. These are the few important things that I wanted to communicate, which are not related to a particular section, but are generic points that I wanted to communicate. The other entrance exams, I'm not going to get into too much of a detail of this. We expect you to write ZAT, SNAP, and NMAT at least. You can write another paper which is TestNet, and you can also look at a paper like MyCat if you are interested in these sectors and want to look at this. TestNet is again something that has started taking CAT scores and CUET scores for a variety of their courses. But till last year, if I leave 23 season, till a year before that, you used to have TestNet. We don't know whether they're going to persist with what they've done in this year's paper. But nonetheless, if at all that paper is conducted, you must write that paper if you are very interested into HR as a sector. MyCat, if you're wanting to build your careers in communication advertising, that's the college to look at, right? Apart from that, these are generic colleges that you should look at. You must definitely look at, because all of these colleges that we are talking about are in top 15 to 20 of this country, which we believe are absolutely good places to start your careers from. Okay, now comes the point where students ask me a lot of times that, sir, can I crack this paper by doing self-study, or is a professional coaching required? Let me give you a disclaimer, and all of you are aware about it because you are a part of this session, that I am a founding member of GradSquare, and hence my opinion might be colored and I might be trying to promote professional coaching, but I will intentionally try to not do that and tell you why professional coaching is important. And if you can manage those pieces on your own, then you should look at self-study. That's what my intent is before I move on to this particular topic and talk about it. Professional coaching helps you gain a lot of conceptual clarity. Why? Because the material is well researched, the classes are well organized, you get experts views, they know what topics to prepare, what topics not to prepare. That's something that becomes challenging when you are doing a self study. You might end up spending huge amount of time on a particular topic, but for all you know, that topic is not coming in the paper. Then that knowledge is good, but will it help you on the paper? Probably not, right? So please understand that they come up with that kind of a expertise. If you know what it is and what to prepare, what not to prepare, I know the structure, I know the paper in and out, great. Go ahead, do your self-study. Constant motivation through these structured classes to generate discipline. Now, please understand, when you are doing self-study, there's nobody asking you to come over a weekend on a classroom, isn't it? Right? So let's say if for 1 week you didn't prepare, there's nobody telling you that you have not prepared, you should look at it. But when they are professional coaching, they will tell you when to come for the classes. When you appear for that classes, you will understand that others are preparing. You stay motivated, you stay focused in your preparation, you stay disciplined in your preparation. If you can manage that discipline on your own, great, thumbs up for you, and you should look at preparing on your own. Benchmarking against peers is absolutely important, and not just peers in the classroom, but outside the classroom in the form of test series is also very, very important. That means most of the students who get 99 percentiles and above end up taking one or the other test series. So if you are being a part of those test series, then the good part is you have already competed against those people at some levels in your preparation itself, right? So that gets you an advantage to understand your competition really well. You might wonder that getting an 80 is very difficult on this paper, but somebody is scoring a 125, and until unless you have written the same paper that somebody else has written, how do you compare yourself? You will not be able to compare yourself. So please understand that your benchmarking is very, very important in a paper like this. Direction to channelize your efforts efficiently. We tell you what to prepare, what not to prepare, how to prepare. If you are down on your motivation, you can speak to us. You can do all of that. If you can find somebody to help you channelize your preparation really well, go ahead, look at your self preparation. Absolutely no problem with that. Am I trying to tell you that nobody clears the paper with self study? Absolutely not. There are several individuals who will clear this paper or doing self study. There's no doubt about it. But there will be several students who thought they can prepare, but they ended up wasting an entire year. So don't be in that category is all what I'm going to say, right? How is GradSquare very different? We have a collective experience of about 50 plus years of training students for this particular paper, because all of our mentors have been doing this for a very, very long time. The chief mentors are the classroom trainers. You are talking to me at this moment. I get into the classroom day in and day out. Morning, I was there in a class. Afternoon, I was there with a student. And in the night, I'm talking to once again students, right? Individual mentoring is something that we are known for, that all our trainers' numbers are available with WhatsApp, are available on WhatsApp to all our students. I am at a distance of one message from my students. They can send me a message at any point in time, and of course expect a response without any troubles at any point in time, any number of times during their preparation. That's something that we are proud of and we are known for, right? So that was in brief that why are we very, very different. I can talk at length, but I understand that this is not a platform where I want to do that. Okay. So any questions at this moment, please do let me know. I'll be happy to take up any questions that you have in the chat box, or I'm allowing you the access of mic as well. If you want to unmute yourself and ask me anything, you can feel free to do so. I haven't got any questions at the moment on the chat box. If you have anything to say, please use your microphones, or you can put up any questions on the chat box and I'll be happy to answer any of those. And if not, then that's our number for you. If you want to reach out to us, please feel free to call up at 9282442221, and we'll be happy to have any queries, any concerns that you have. We'll be happy to have a word with you. Understand this thing that we keep conducting several of these sessions like the one that I'm conducting today. Going forward, we will conduct a very, very specific session talking about logical reasoning and data interpretation section and how to prepare for this. Do we get freedom to choose our mentors in any section? Rishabh, of course, please understand that most of our trainers having an expertise across all the three sections, but you can talk to any of the trainers. There's absolutely no problem about any of these sections. So you can talk to me about English also. I'll help you as much as I can. You can talk to Varun on anything and he'll be happy to help you. So you choose whom you want to get in touch with, and there is absolutely no problem. Everybody will respond. Any further doubts, anything that you want me to speak about, please do let me know. Anything that you are not clear about that you feel I should have covered. Okay. So looks like I do not have any questions at the moment for me. I'm just putting up my name and number on the screen for you. If you wish, you can feel free to reach out to me for any of the guidance. 8879795748 is my number. Feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. This number is there on WhatsApp as well. Right? Thank you so much, guys, for being so patient with me and giving me a very, very patient hearing. I appreciate your presence, and keep following us on variety of channels, and we'll be coming up. We'll come up with several of these kind of sessions, which will be, to our mind, very, very helpful for anyone preparing for CAT 24. Wish you all the best, guys. Thank you so much, and good night and take care. Thank you.